The doorbell's shrill ring shattered our Sunday afternoon peace. I froze, wooden spoon suspended over the simmering pot of chili. Marty glanced up from his crossword puzzle, eyebrows raised. "Expecting someone, Clara?" he asked. I shook my head, wiping my hands on my apron. "No, must be a neighbor." As I made my way to the front door, Toby thundered down the stairs. "I'll get it, Mom." "Hold on, sweetie," I called, quickening my pace. Something felt off. We rarely had unexpected visitors, especially on lazy Sundays like this. I reached the door just as Toby's hand touched the knob. "Let me, honey." Toby shrugged and stepped back. I took a deep breath, smoothed my hair, and opened the door. The world tilted on its axis. "Hello, Clara," said a voice I hadn't heard in years. "Long time no see." David, my ex-husband, the man I'd hoped never to lay eyes on again. "What are you doing here?" I managed to choke out, instinctively pushing Toby behind me. David's eyes flickered to our son, then back to me. "We need to talk." "Mom?" Toby's voice wavered. "Who's this?" I swallowed hard. "No one important, sweetie. Go help Marty set the table for dinner." "But..." "Now, Toby." He hesitated, then trudged back to the kitchen. I stepped onto the porch, pulling the door closed behind me. "You have no right to show up here unannounced," I hissed. "What do you want?" David's face hardened. "What's rightfully mine? The necklace, Clara." My grandmother's necklace. My hand flew to my throat where the delicate gold chain rested. "What are you talking about? This was a gift." "A gift you have no right to keep after what you did." Anger flared in my chest. "After what I did? You've got some nerve." "Everything okay out here?" Marty's deep voice cut through the tension. He appeared in the doorway, his solid presence immediately calming me. David's eyes narrowed. "And you must be the new husband. How quaint." Marty stepped forward, extending his hand. "Marty Callahan, and you are?" "David Reeves, Clara's first husband." Marty's hand dropped. "I see. Well, Mr. Reeves, I'm not sure why you're here, but..." "He was just leaving," I interjected. David laughed, a harsh sound that set my teeth on edge. "Oh, I don't think so. Not until I get what I came for." Marty's arm slipped around my waist. "Clara, honey, what's going on?" I took a shaky breath. David seems to think he has a claim on my grandmother's necklace." "Your grandmother?" David scoffed. "That necklace belonged to my family for generations. You know that." "It was a gift," I repeated. "From your mother, when we got married. A gift she never should have given you, and one you certainly don't deserve to keep." Marty's grip tightened. "I think you should leave now, Mr. Reeves." David's eyes glittered dangerously. "This isn't over, Clara. That necklace is coming back to my family, one way or another." He turned on his heel and strode down the walkway. I watched him go, my heart pounding. Marty turned me to face him. "Clara, what was that all about?" I shook my head, fighting back tears. "I don't know. I haven't seen or heard from David in years. I don't understand why he's suddenly shown up, demanding the necklace." "Mom?" Toby's voice drifted from inside. "Is everything okay?" I plastered on a smile and called back, "Everything's fine, sweetie. We'll be right in." Marty cupped my face in his hands. "We'll figure this out, Clara. I promise." I nodded, trying to believe him. But as we walked back into the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that our peaceful life was about to be turned upside down, and all because of a necklace I'd almost forgotten I owned. I couldn't sleep that night. David's sudden appearance had unleashed a flood of memories I'd spent years trying to forget. As I tossed and turned, Marty's steady breathing beside me, I found myself transported back to a time I'd rather leave buried. "Clara," Marty's sleepy voice broke through my reverie. "You're thinking so loud I can practically hear it." I sighed, turning to face him. "I'm sorry. It's just seeing David again. It's brought everything back." Marty propped himself up on one elbow, his eyes soft with concern. "Talk to me, honey. What's really going on?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "It's not just about the necklace. It's everything." And so, in the darkness of our bedroom, I began to unravel the tangled web of my past with David. "We were so young when we got married," I started. "So full of hope and dreams, but then..." "The fertility issues," Marty finished softly. I nodded, feeling the old ache resurface. Month after month, year after year, the disappointments, the treatments, the fights. It was killing us, Marty, killing me. "And David, how did he handle it?" I laughed bitterly. "Oh, he handled it all right, by sleeping with his secretary." Marty's sharp intake of breath was audible in the quiet room. "Clara, I had no idea. I never told anyone the whole story," I admitted. "It was too painful." But that's not even the worst part. I sat up, needing to move. Marty followed suit, taking my hand in his. "What happened?" he asked gently. "I found out I was pregnant," I whispered. "The day after I caught him with her. Can you believe it? After all those years of trying, it finally happened. And he had the audacity to question if it was his." Marty's grip on my hand tightened. "That bastard," he muttered. "I left him that day," I continued. "Packed my bags and walked out. His mother, she gave me the necklace, said I deserved something good from that family. And now he wants it back," Marty mused. "But why now? After all these years?" Before I could respond, a muffled thud from downstairs made us both freeze. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Marty nodded, already sliding out of bed. "Stay here," he instructed, reaching for the baseball bat we kept in the closet. My heart pounding, I listened as Marty crept down the stairs. The seconds stretched into an eternity. Then, suddenly, a crash, followed by raised voices. Unable to stay put any longer, I rushed downstairs, nearly colliding with Toby in the hallway. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, eyes wide with fear. "Stay behind me," I ordered, pushing him back as we descended the stairs. The scene in our living room made my blood run cold. Marty stood, bat raised, facing off against David, who was clutching something in his hand. "David," I exclaimed, "what the hell are you doing in our house?" He turned to me, his eyes wild. "I told you I'd get what's mine, Clara, one way or another." It was then I realized what he was holding. My jewelry box. "How dare you break into our home?" Marty growled, taking a step forward. David laughed, a manic edge to his voice. "Your home? This should have been my family, my son, my life." "Dad?" Toby's small voice came from behind me. You're my dad?" The room fell silent. David's eyes locked onto Toby, a mix of emotions flashing across his face. "Toby, go back upstairs," I said firmly, not taking my eyes off David. "But Mom, now, Toby!" As Toby's footsteps retreated, David's gaze returned to me. "You kept him from me all these years, Clara, and now you're going to pay." He reached into his pocket, pulling out something that glinted in the dim light. My heart stopped. A gun. The world seemed to slow down as I stared at the gun in David's trembling hand. Marty stepped in front of me, his voice steady despite the tension in his shoulders. "Put the gun down, David. You don't want to do this." David's laugh was hollow. "You don't know what I want. You have no idea what it's like to lose everything." I found my voice, anger overriding fear. "You lost nothing, David. You threw it all away." His eyes, wild with desperation, locked onto mine. "I made a mistake, Clara. One stupid mistake, and you took my son away from me." "You took yourself away," I shot back. "You questioned if he was even yours." The gun wavered in David's hand. I was scared, confused, but I'm here now. I want to make things right. Marty's calm voice cut through the tension. "This isn't the way, David. Think about Toby. What would he want?" At the mention of Toby's name, something in David's eyes shifted. The gun lowered slightly, and I saw a flicker of the man I once loved. "I just want to know my son," he whispered. In that moment, I realized how much Marty had changed my life. His unwavering support, his love for Toby, his ability to bring calm to chaos, it all came rushing to the forefront of my mind. I thought back to the day I met Marty, barely 2 months after leaving David. I was a mess, trying to navigate single motherhood and a high-risk pregnancy. Marty, a friend of a friend, had offered to help me move into my new apartment. "I don't need charity," I had snapped at him. His response was a gentle smile. "It's not charity, Clara. It's what decent people do for each other." That day, as he patiently assembled furniture and hung curtains, never pushing for more than I was willing to give, I felt the first stirrings of hope in months. Over the next year, as I adjusted to life with Toby, Marty became a constant presence. He was there for Toby's first steps, his first words. He was there when I cried over lost dreams and celebrated new beginnings. When Toby was 2, Marty proposed. I hesitated, scarred by my past. "I'm not asking to replace anyone," he had said. "I'm asking to build something new together. You, me, and Toby." Now, facing down my past in the form of an armed and desperate David, I knew with absolute certainty that Marty was the best decision I had ever made. I stepped out from behind Marty, ignoring his attempt to pull me back. "David," I said softly, "put the gun down, please, for Toby's sake." His hand shook. "I just want a chance." "And you'll get one," I promised, though the words tasted bitter. "But not like this. Never like this." Slowly, agonizingly, David lowered the gun. As soon as it left his hand, Marty was there, kicking it away and restraining David. "I've called the police," Toby's voice came from the stairs. We all turned to see him, phone in hand, tears streaming down his face. "Oh, sweetheart," I breathed, rushing to him. As sirens wailed in the distance, I held my son close, Marty's strong presence at our backs. David sagged in defeat, the fight gone out of him. In the chaos of the arriving police and the barrage of questions that followed, one thought kept circling in my mind. How could I ever explain this to Toby? How could I help him understand the complexities of adult relationships, the mistakes we make, and the consequences that follow? As the police led David away, Toby's small voice cut through the noise. "Mom, is he really my dad?" I looked at Marty, seeing the love and concern in his eyes, then back at Toby. Biologically, yes, but being a dad is about so much more than that. It's about love, support, and being there no matter what. Toby nodded slowly, his gaze drifting to Marty. "Like Marty?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said, feeling a lump form in my throat. "Exactly like Marty." The days following David's arrest were a blur of police statements, hushed conversations, and Toby's endless questions. Through it all, Marty remained my rock, his steady presence a balm to my frayed nerves. But as the dust began to settle, a new worry took root. How would Marty's parents react to this mess? I'd always felt a mix of gratitude and unworthiness when it came to George and Helen Callahan. They'd welcomed Toby and me into their family with open arms, never once making us feel like outsiders. Their acceptance was a stark contrast to the cold shoulder my own parents had given me after my divorce. "We should tell them what happened," Marty said one evening, sensing my unease. "They'll understand, Clara." I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me. Would they still see me as worthy of their son after learning about the chaos I'd brought into his life? The drive to the Callahans' sprawling Victorian home the next day felt like a march to the gallows. Toby, blissfully unaware of my inner turmoil, chattered excitedly about showing his grandpa his new remote-controlled car. Helen greeted us at the door, her warm smile faltering as she took in our somber expressions. "What's wrong, dears?" George appeared behind her, his bushy eyebrows furrowed with concern. "Toby, why don't you go set up your car in the backyard?" Marty suggested gently. As soon as Toby was out of earshot, we spilled the whole sordid tale. I watched their faces carefully as we recounted David's reappearance, his accusations, and the terrifying night he broke in. Helen's hand flew to her mouth in shock, while George's jaw clenched tighter with each word. When we finished, silence hung heavy in the air. I braced myself for their judgment, for the disappointment I was sure would follow. Instead, Helen reached out and took my hand. "Oh, Clara," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "what a terrible ordeal you've been through." George cleared his throat. "That man had no right to threaten you or our grandson," he said gruffly. "You did the right thing, calling the police." I blinked back tears, overwhelmed by their unwavering support. You're not ashamed to have me in your family?" "Ashamed?" Helen exclaimed. "Darling, we couldn't be prouder of how you've handled this situation. You've shown incredible strength and grace." George nodded in agreement. "You're a Callahan now, Clara, and Callahans stick together." Their words washed over me like a healing balm, soothing wounds I didn't even know I had. For the first time since David's reappearance, I felt truly safe. But our moment of peace was shattered by the shrill ring of Marty's phone. His face darkened as he listened to the caller. "What is it?" I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. Marty's voice was tight as he replied, "That was my contact at the police station. David's been released on bail." The room spun around me. "How?" I gasped. "He broke into our home. He had a gun." "Apparently he's got some powerful friends," Marty said grimly. "They're claiming it was all a misunderstanding." George stood up, his face set with determination. "This is unacceptable. I won't have my family threatened." "Dad," Marty began, but George cut him off. "No, son, it's time I made some calls. Your Uncle Richard owes me a favor, and he's got connections that could make life very difficult for this David character." I felt a flicker of hope, quickly followed by a wave of guilt. "I don't want to cause any trouble," I said weakly. Helen squeezed my hand. "You're not causing anything, dear. We protect our own." As George disappeared into his study, phone in hand, I was struck by a realization. This was what true family looked like. Not the conditional love of my parents or the toxic possessiveness of David, but unconditional support and protection. Marty wrapped an arm around me. "What do you want to do, Clara?" I took a deep breath, drawing strength from the love surrounding me. "I want to fight," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I want to end this once and for all." Little did I know, my decision would set in motion a chain of events that would change all our lives forever. The crisp envelope landed on our kitchen table with a soft thud, but it might as well have been a bomb. I stared at David's name in the return address, my hands shaking as I reached for it. "You don't have to open it," Marty said softly, his hand on my shoulder. I shook my head. "No, I need to know what he's up to." With trembling fingers, I tore open the envelope. As I read the contents, my blood ran cold. "He's suing us," I whispered, "for the necklace and for custody of Toby." Marty's grip on my shoulder tightened. "He can't do that. He has no rights." "Apparently he thinks he does," I said, scanning the legal jargon. "He's claiming I denied him his parental rights all these years." Marty's face darkened. "This is ridiculous. After what he did breaking in here? We'll fight this, Clara, every step of the way." I nodded, but fear clawed at my insides. What if David won? What if he took Toby away from me? The next few days were a whirlwind of lawyer consultations and sleepless nights. Toby sensed the tension, becoming clingy and irritable. I felt like I was failing him all over again. It was during one particularly trying afternoon that the doorbell rang. I opened it to find David standing there, a smug smile on his face. "Hello, Clara," he said, as if he hadn't threatened us with a gun just weeks ago. "I think it's time we talked." Before I could slam the door in his face, Marty appeared behind me. "You're not welcome here," he said, his voice low and dangerous. David's smile didn't falter. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want what's mine." "Nothing here is yours," I spat. "Oh, but it is," David replied. "That necklace belongs to my family. And Toby, he's my son. It's time I took my rightful place in his life." Marty stepped forward, his presence imposing. "You lost any right to call yourself Toby's father the moment you questioned his paternity. Now I suggest you leave before I call the police. Again." David's eyes narrowed. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Playing happy families with my wife and my child. But I've got news for you, Marty. I've got friends in high places. One word from me, and your perfect little life comes crashing down." I felt Marty tense beside me, but his voice remained steady. "Is that so?" "Well, let me tell you something, David. You're not the only one with connections. You really want to play this game? Because I can guarantee you won't like how it ends." For a moment, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in David's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by anger. "This isn't over," he snarled, turning to leave. "You'll be hearing from my lawyers." As we watched him drive away, I turned to Marty. "What did you mean about connections?" Marty sighed. "I didn't want to worry you, but I've been doing some digging. David's not as squeaky clean as he'd like everyone to believe. I've got evidence of some questionable business practices." My eyes widened. "You mean?" "I mean, if he wants to play dirty, we've got ammunition," Marty said grimly. "But Clara, using this information, it could get ugly, really ugly." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the decision before me. On one hand, exposing David could end this nightmare once and for all. On the other, it could drag us all through the mud, affecting Toby in ways I couldn't even imagine. "What should we do?" I whispered. Marty pulled me close. "That's up to you, love. I'll support whatever you decide. But remember, we're not just fighting for the necklace anymore. We're fighting for our family." I nodded, my mind racing. As much as I wanted this to be over, I knew I had to think of Toby first. But how far was I willing to go to protect him? And at what cost? Taking a deep breath, I looked up at Marty. I think it's time we fought fire with fire. For Toby's sake." Little did I know, my decision would set in motion a chain of events that would change all our lives forever. The day after our confrontation with David, Marty's phone rang. His face tightened as he listened, and I felt my stomach drop. "That was Uncle Richard," he said, hanging up. "He wants to meet us. Now." Uncle Richard was a name I'd heard whispered with a mix of awe and fear. A powerful attorney with connections in every corner of the city, he was the Callahan family's secret weapon. An hour later, we sat in his opulent office, the city sprawling beneath us through floor-to-ceiling windows. Richard Callahan was every bit as imposing as I'd imagined, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, with an air of authority that filled the room. "So," he said, leaning back in his leather chair, "David Reeves is causing trouble." I nodded, my throat dry. "He's suing for custody of our son and demanding the return of a family heirloom." Richard's eyes narrowed. "And you're sure you want to fight this?" "Yes," I said firmly, gripping Marty's hand. "We can't let him win." A slow smile spread across Richard's face. "Good, because I've done some digging, and what I've found, well, let's just say Mr. Reeves isn't as squeaky clean as he'd like people to believe." He slid a file across the desk. As Marty and I pored over its contents, my eyes widened in shock. Fraudulent business deals, offshore accounts, even evidence of bribery, David's carefully constructed facade was nothing but a house of cards. "With this information," Richard continued, "we can not only crush his lawsuit, but potentially ruin him completely. The question is, are you prepared for the fallout?" I hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. "What kind of fallout?" "This will be messy," Richard warned. "Once we start, there's no going back. David will be destroyed professionally and personally. It could affect Toby, knowing what his biological father has done." I closed my eyes, torn between the desire for justice and the need to protect my son. But then I remembered David's smug face, his threats, the terror of that night he broke into our home. My resolve hardened. "Do it," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Richard nodded, reaching for his phone. "I'll set things in motion immediately." The next few days were a whirlwind. News of David's misdeeds spread like wildfire through the business community. His company's stock plummeted, partners distanced themselves, and whispers of a federal investigation filled the air. I watched it all unfold with a mix of satisfaction and guilt. But nothing prepared me for the moment Toby came home from school, tears in his eyes. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice small. "Is Dad really a bad guy?" My heart shattered. I pulled him close, struggling to find the right words. "Your father? He's made some mistakes, honey, but that doesn't change who you are." As I held my sobbing son, I wondered if we'd made the right choice. Had our desire for justice blinded us to the cost? But there was no time to dwell on regrets. That evening, as we sat down to dinner, a frantic pounding on our front door made us all jump. I opened it to find David, disheveled and wild-eyed. The man who had once exuded confidence and control now looked broken. "What have you done?" he hissed, pushing past me into the house. "You've ruined everything." Marty was there in an instant, placing himself between David and me. "You need to leave now." But David was beyond reason. He lunged forward, his hands reaching for my throat. "You bitch! You've destroyed my life!" As Marty grappled with David, I heard Toby's terrified scream from the kitchen. In that moment, watching my son witness this violence, something inside me snapped. I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy vase, and swung it with all my might. It connected with David's head with a sickening thud, and he crumpled to the floor. As sirens wailed in the distance and Toby sobbed in my arms, I stared at David's unconscious form. What had we become, and how could we ever come back from this? The days following David's attack blurred together in a haze of police statements, hushed conversations, and Toby's nightmares. I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, one wrong move away from plummeting into an abyss of guilt and regret. It was a crisp autumn morning when the call came. David wanted to meet. Alone. "Absolutely not," Marty insisted, his face etched with worry. "It's too dangerous." But I knew this had to end, for all of us. I need to do this, Marty. For Toby. For us. The cafe we agreed to meet at was nearly empty. I spotted David immediately, hunched over a coffee cup, a shadow of his former self. As I approached, he looked up, his eyes hollow and desperate. "Clara," he croaked, "thank you for coming." I sat across from him, my heart pounding. "What do you want, David?" He ran a trembling hand through his unkempt hair. "I've lost everything. My job, my reputation, my future. I need your help." I stared at him, incredulous. "My help? After everything you've done?" "Please," he begged, reaching for my hand. I pulled away instinctively. "If you just tell them it was all a misunderstanding, that you exaggerated." "Exaggerated?" My voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. "Like, you broke into our home, you threatened us with a gun, you tried to take our son away." David's face crumpled. I was desperate. I just wanted to be part of Toby's life, to have something of my old life back. For a moment I felt a flicker of pity. But then I remembered Toby's tears. the fear in his eyes. "You lost that right long ago, David, when you questioned if he was even yours." "I know," he whispered, "and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But please, Clara, I'm begging you, help me salvage something. Anything." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to say. "No, David, I won't help you. This ends now. You need to leave us alone, for good." His eyes hardened, a glimpse of the old David shining through. "You can't do this to me. You'll what?" I interrupted, my voice steady. "There's nothing left for you to threaten us with. It's over." I stood to leave, but David grabbed my wrist. "The necklace. At least give me that. It's all I have left of my family." I hesitated, my hand instinctively going to my throat where the necklace rested. For a moment, I considered it. Would giving him this small piece of his past finally bring us peace? But then I remembered the day David's mother had given it to me. "You're family now," she had said. "This belongs to you." I gently pried David's fingers from my wrist. "No, David, the necklace is mine, just like this life is mine, the life I've built with Marty and Toby, a life you have no place in anymore." As I turned to walk away, David called out, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry, Clara, for everything. I hope you can forgive me someday." I paused at the door, looking back at the broken man who had once been my husband. "Goodbye, David," I said softly. "I hope you find peace." Stepping out into the sunlight, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely. But as I walked home, a new worry gnawed at me. How would I explain this to Toby? How could I help him understand the complexities of forgiveness and closure? As I approached our house, I saw Toby and Marty in the front yard, laughing as they raked leaves. The sight of them, so carefree and happy, brought tears to my eyes. I realized then that while the past would always be a part of us, it didn't have to define our future. Taking a deep breath, I walked towards my family, ready to face whatever came next, together. The weeks following my confrontation with David were filled with a strange mix of relief and unease. Each day that passed without incident felt like a small victory, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the other shoe was about to drop. It was a quiet Sunday morning when it finally did. I was sipping coffee, scrolling through my emails, when I saw it. Subject line, "One last plea." From David. My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won out. I opened it, bracing myself for more manipulation, more threats. Instead, I found something unexpected. "Clara," it began, "I know I have no right to contact you, but I needed to say this. I'm leaving town, for good. I've realized that my presence here is toxic, not just for you and Toby, but for myself. I'm sorry for all the pain I've caused. I hope that one day, Toby might be willing to know me, but I understand if that never happens. The necklace is yours, as it should be. Take care of our son. Goodbye." I read it 3 times, tears blurring my vision. It felt like the final chapter of a book I'd been trying to close for years. "Clara?" Marty's voice startled me. "What's wrong?" I handed him my phone, watching his face as he read. When he finished, he looked at me, concern etched in his features. "Are you okay?" I took a deep breath, surprised to find that I was. "Yes," I said, realizing it was true. "I think I finally am." Just then, Toby bounded into the kitchen, full of 10-year-old energy. "Mom, Dad, can we go to the park today?" Marty and I exchanged glances. "Of course, buddy," Marty said. "Go get ready." As Toby raced upstairs, I turned to Marty. "I think it's time we talk to him. About everything." Marty nodded, pulling me into a hug. "Together," he said. That afternoon, sitting on a park bench while Toby played nearby, we told him the whole story. About David, about our past, about the recent turmoil. Toby listened with a maturity that both broke my heart and filled me with pride. When we finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "So David is my real dad?" I felt Marty tense beside me, but before I could respond, Toby continued, "But Marty is my dad, right? The one who's always been there?" Tears sprang to my eyes as I pulled Toby close. "Yes, sweetheart, Marty is your dad in all the ways that truly matter." Toby nodded, seeming satisfied. "Okay, can I go play now?" As we watched him run off, Marty took my hand. "He's an amazing kid, Clara. We're lucky." I leaned into him, feeling a peace I hadn't known in months. "We are, and I'm lucky to have you. Through all of this, you've been my rock." Marty kissed the top of my head. "We're a team, remember? For better or worse." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, I found myself fingering the necklace. For so long it had felt like a burden, a reminder of past pain, but now I saw it differently. It was a symbol of resilience, of family, of love that endures. I unclasped it, holding it out to Marty. "I want you to have this," I said. His eyes widened. "Clara, no, it's yours." I shook my head, smiling. "It's ours, our family's, and one day it'll be Toby's, a reminder of where he came from and the love that brought him here." Marty's eyes glistened as he took the necklace, carefully placing it in his pocket. "I love you, Clara, more than I can say." "I love you too," I whispered, watching as Toby ran towards us, laughing and carefree. In that moment, I knew that whatever challenges life might bring, we would face them together. Our little family, bound not by blood or gold, but by something far stronger, love, trust, and the choice to stand by each other, come what may. As Toby reached us, throwing his arms around us both, I felt a sense of completion. The storm had passed, and we had emerged stronger, more united than ever. This, I realized, was our happily ever after. Not perfect, not without its scars, but real and beautiful in its imperfection. And I wouldn't